this is the project I'm working on at the moment, so if you want to check that out, then go to the website www.jewellerytrainingsolutions.com.au and you can learn how to make that. But I thought I'd make another one and try out a different style of setting, and this is making a gallery bezel for a cabochon stone. I reckon it looks really cool, so I thought I'd share it with my YouTube followers. So hope you enjoy. So this is the ring ready for setting, and I'm going to set this in the conventional way of just pushing the bezel onto the stone. But before I do that, I've made another ring, the same except for the setting has been positioned going crossways, so that gives you an idea of how that looks. And for this one I'm going to do a different style of setting, so I'm going to do a gallery around the setting, so it means I need to perform some cut work, and it does look really nice and fancy, and you could just randomly go around marking out your sections that you're going to cut just by eye, but the chances of that meeting up perfectly at the end is very unlikely. So I'm going to show you how to mark out and make it look really neat and accurate, get all the sections exactly the same. And this reminds me of a project in the apprentice training. So this is the eternity ring, and this has all been hand cut, so there's no machinery or anything like that involved. It's all done with the piercing saw, and this is called hors jeu work with the back cutting there, again just with the piercing saw. And this has got 21 stones in it, so part of the exercise is to mark it out accurately and get all the sections exactly the same. Quite difficult to do, so in this case I divide this into 3 sections first of all, and then just work on marking out in each of those sections. So this is going to be pretty much the same. So as long as you've got a keen eye to see what is symmetrical and what's not, then it's quite easy. So all you do is you lay your blade right over the top of the setting, and you might want to shut one eye and just look directly down and just make sure the sides mirror each other, and then a little back cut like so. I'll leave a little mark on the top of the setting. So now I can just cut that in a little bit, and I'm lining the blade up also with the shank as well. Now if you've got a keen eye, you might be able to work out the cross markings as well, doing the same thing, but it's not easy to do that. So what I recommend you do is just get a little bit of binding wire and just hold it across the cuts that you've just done. So if they're not holding properly in there, then just go deeper with your piercing saw. And there you can see that the wire is across the setting, and it means that you can do exactly the same as you just did, and just lay your saw blade across until you get a perfect cross right in the middle of the wire there. And again, with one eye shut, just look down and make sure your 4 sections look exactly the same, and then a back cut. So we now know that those sections are marked out correctly, so now we can just work on each individual one. So what I'll do now for each individual section, I'm just going to put a black mark on the very top of the setting so I can see it better. And I'm going to just use my eye now and just again look directly down and make sure you're right in the middle of those markings, and that will give you a marking for the centre of that. It actually just needs moving over a little bit. And if you want to be really accurate, then you can use your dividers just to make sure that those markings are in the correct position. That tells me it does need moving over a little bit. So I'll just move that over, and now I can firm up that cut and cut it down a little bit so I don't lose it. Same with the end ones. And now you can decide at this stage, you can do it all around, do it exactly the same, so then you'll have your all your 8 sections ready to go, and you've got a gap there that could either be chopped into 2, 3 or 4, so it depends what kind of tightness you want on the gallery. So before I decide that, I'll do the other 3 sections. Now I've decided to make each of those sections, turn them into 2 sections. That way I can cut the gallery down the setting wall a little bit further. If there were smaller sections, you can't really go down that far. So, but totally up to you. You might want a slightly different effect. So you should be able to just chop these sections into 2 just by eye. And I'm just cutting down a little bit, and next I'll swap over to a 3 square needle file. So a 3 square, bit of an odd term for the shape. It's actually a triangular shape, and that is going to start the gallery cut work for me. Now I've set my dividers to, I just guessed at it, but I'll give you the measurement. It's only set to 1.5 mil, and this is just to help me guide the cut work down the setting. I might actually cut past this, but at least I know that the cuts will all go down the same amount. Yeah, with the 3 square needle file, I can just file down, and if I notice any of the sections are a little bit off, which I've just noticed this one is, then I can just push the file over if required. So that has worked out all right on that one, and just work your way around and stop at the scribe line. I'm just going to go slightly past that marking, and I'm making sure that my file goes directly across as well, and that will open up the triangle. If you file it at an angle like that, then you won't be able to see the stone as well through the opening there. Now you can see, if I did opt to put more cuts in, then it would be very tight there. So I think I made the right decision. So now I just need to round off the top of the setting, and I can do that with the same needle file, just taking off the very corners and not filing anything down off the top of the setting. So you can just go in one direction to start with, and then swap over once you've gone all the way around. This is called a Morse disc, and if you get a Morse disc or a packet of them, I'm going to be using a fine grade, so they come in fine, possibly extra fine, medium and coarse, so don't use anything more than fine if you're going to use this. And that's the mandrel that comes with it, so you need to make sure you get the clip-on mandrel as well. So that's that, and you could use this to just smooth off your cuts, get rid of all your file marks. However, it can be quite aggressive and you can easily take it down too far. So if you're not used to using one of those, then I recommend that you cut some strips of emery paper. This is actually 600 grit, but 800 grit will be fine for this as well, and just repeat the process. It doesn't need that much. Make sure you round it off, and then you can guarantee you're not going to take too much off. And if you've got a buff stick with 2000 grits emery paper on it, then you can just go around and get it ready for a polish. You'll notice that there's a little bit of flashing on the inside of the setting, and you can quite easily pick this off with a file. This will hinder the stone going in, so it does need to be removed. I've got here a brownie disc wheel, pretty worn down. This will do it really efficiently. Okay, so I'll give it a polish. I'll just get rid of that scribe line. This is a cotton mop with some cutting compound on. I use Hyphen as a cutting compound. You might prefer to use Tripoli, that's up to you. And when you buy them, they don't look like this at all. They're white and fluffy, so they wear down and start looking a little bit more like a polishing mop that you get on your polishing motor once they're broken in. And now I can just use the corner or the edge of the polishing mop just to get into all the cuts, get it nice and polished, and then I'll give it another bit of polish on the polishing motor, ready for the stone. So try and prepare it as much as possible before the stone goes in. So now I'll put the stone in. If your work was done correctly earlier, then it should be a matter of just pushing it in at one end there and pressing it down. And you'll see that there's a gap at the top of the inside of each of these sections here, so that's what we're going to push down. Now, you could use a standard pusher. When I say standard, I put a little groove in this, and it just helps to latch it onto the setting without it slipping. But just a standard pusher with a flat end is okay to set with. But for this one, I'm going to use a brass pusher, and this is just 3mm round brass wire, and comes in very handy for making tools. So what I can see is that if I just put a little burr on the inside or on the end of the brass there, that should hold on to the top of each of the sections, less chance of it slipping. If you haven't got the brass tool, don't worry about it, just use a standard pusher. So just with a round burr, just putting a nice divot in the top there, and now I can just rest it on there. I can feel that it's actually found its place quite nicely, and just give it a little bit of a push, and you can just roll it around, and that's closed nicely onto the stone. Now with stone setting, you always go to the opposite, and that just ensures that the stone isn't being pushed over one side. You can keep it centered. You also notice that when I put the stone in, it was very shiny inside the setting, so that shine shows itself through the stone. This is it's quite transparent. It's not perfectly transparent, but it's transparent enough that if you had some dirt in there, you would see it. So I recommend you do this by hand. rather than clamp it in a ring clamp, because this wire, if you clamp it too tight, will bend together, could possibly break the joint there. So do it by hand, push into the bench peg. Now that I've done the 4 sections, I know that the stone's centered, so I can just randomly pick a section and push it into place. So this brass tool is doing a perfect job of this. One thing I also recommend is not only get yourself some 3mm round brass wire, get yourself plenty of handles as well. If you follow my program, you'll see I make a lot of tools. Yeah, the other good thing about using brass as a tool when you're working against stones is that brass has quite a low Mohs hardness. It's around about 3 or 4 on the Mohs hardness chart. This stone is between 6 and 7 on the Mohs hardness chart, which means that the stone's way harder than the brass. So if I did slip, I'm not going to scratch it, whereas the steel, if I use that, it's got around about the same Mohs hardness, so it could damage the stone. The only thing that you need to be wary of with brass is because it's soft, it can bend if you put too much pressure on. This is only a short run here, so it's very unlikely I'll bend that. And if you bend it, you could slip. So it's finished, and I reckon that looks pretty good. I've hardly left a mark, so I'll just give it a very light buff, and then we'll take a look. There we have it, set and finished. And just a further note about the hardness of stones: when you're cleaning up around the setting with the stone in place, don't contact the stone with emery paper. It's likely to scratch, and I've seen many a heartbroken student make that mistake. Hope you enjoyed.